labor module that includes the employee clock in, clock out, and the labor scheduling module. But first, we're going to look at some of the questions that you should be talking or asking as a referral partner to that end user, so that you can get an idea of what they're doing and how they're doing it. Now, number of employees, who does the payroll, how often is payroll done, what do they use now or intend to use if this is a new store, how much are they spending in overtime, and how do they stop employees from riding the clock. So let's look at each of these individually, and then we'll better understand how these affect the profit and loss of that operation. First off, the number of employees. You're going to have Aldelo Express be used by a restaurant that is actually too small for the labor scheduling. But don't discount the fact that they have to use the time clock. We actually, at Aldelo, got a call yesterday from a state auditor who is looking at auditing a restaurant for labor violations. They called us to make sure that the program that this customer was using does have payroll, it does have a time clock, and that they could use that in their operation. What was happening is an employee had filed a grievance with the state saying that they had not been properly paid. That is in a restaurant where they weren't using the time and attendance module. They were using paper and pencil to track the time for that employee. That is not a good way to do it. In fact, in some states, it might be illegal. In this particular case, the restaurant is going to be audited for 3 months worth of payroll data to either prove or disprove this employee's claim that they were not paid properly. Having a time clock in the point of sale system, then using that will eliminate or at least decrease the depth of which that audit is going to happen. So even if they have just 1 or 2 employees, they really should at least use the time and attendance to punch in, punch out, clock in, clock out. But what we found is in analyzing restaurants is that they have 10 or more employees, they really, really need to use not only the time clock function, but the scheduler as well. So who does the payroll? You need to ask that, and what you're going to find is if they use an accountant or a service, that they're probably large enough to use the scheduler. How often is payroll done? This is key from the standpoint of the more often it's done, it's the more work. And the more work is actually going to be labor. So it could be a labor-intensive thing if they're doing payroll every week. If it's a restaurant that is tracking tips for tipped employees, that also adds into the amount of time and payroll dollars that it's going to cost to do that. You need a payroll system, a point of sale system that will then track and keep up with the labor and as well as the tips. What do they use now? Or what do they intend to use if this is a new operation or a new store? If they're anything other than pen and paper, they need a system. They need a point of sale system that's going to have labor involved. How much are they spending in overtime? This may be a tricky question, and here's why. Every dollar that they spend in overtime is controllable with a schedule enforcement feature that, like Aldelo Express has. But you're going to find in a lot of businesses, they run a lot of part-time people. So they may run a 20, 30-hour shift per person just to keep them below the threshold of having to provide benefits. That's fine, and it's work, and there's nothing wrong with it. But if you have 2 employees that are supposed to work 20 hours each, if they work 25 by riding the clock, while that may not be overtime, it is extra money spent on payroll that they should not or should not have to deal with. If you got a 20-hour-a-week employee, they should work 20. If they work anything over that, then that's money's lost by the restaurant. So how do they stop employees from riding the clock? They're probably going to look at you kind of funny as to what do you mean? And we're just talking about that, is how that employee may be coming and clocking in early or clocking out late. So what happens is the employees will come in, clock in when they arrive at the restaurant, go do their hair, fix their makeup, go out, smoke a cigarette, do something that will be done on the clock when they're really not supposed to be even on the clock at that point. And the same thing about when they clock out. They'll do their paperwork, they'll do their shift work, they'll do other things that are supposed to be when they're off the clock. So they will ride that clock whatever they can. So the answer is probably going to be they probably don't do anything. They don't monitor it, they don't watch it, and they're having people that are absolutely milking it for everything they can get. And then the myth is they probably don't know what their P&L is showing for labor cost. And that's really kind of sad. The restaurants that we're seeing fail are the ones that are not using the time and attendance. They're not using labor schedule. They're not really taking the time to use the features of their point of sale system. So they're not paying attention to their business. If they have a good answer, I'd be very shocked. Most often, they're not going to know what you're talking about. But industry average says if they are a quick service, counter service restaurant, something that's not table service, then their labor cost should be 25%. If they're table service, it should be between 30 and 40%. The wide variance there, it depends upon if they are a low-end table service restaurant or a high-end white tablecloth. The white tablecloth restaurant is going to run a different type of labor cost. All in all, those numbers plus the food cost should equal around 60 to 65% on their P&L. So in a quick service restaurant, 25% labor should equal to also about 35 to 40% food cost. That equals up that 60, 65%. You should know these numbers and have these at your fingertips so that you know what that restaurant's supposed to be in labor cost. And what you're going to shoot for is understanding that in a restaurant that's doing, let's say, $500,000 a year, a simple 1% difference in labor cost equals up to about $5,000 in additional profit. That's about $600 a month, and it's quite easily made up when you're dealing with a labor cost and scheduling software. Just the sheer fact that if you had 10 employees and those 10 employees were riding the clock just 30 minutes a day, which is nothing, 15 minutes before, 15 minutes after, that's 5 hours a day times 30 days. You're looking at 150 hours. That could be a lot adding up to be that's a lot of money that was just being wasted that could be solved by a labor scheduling module. So let's take a look at some things you're going to have to be aware of. That labor laws vary by state. Aldelo Express may have some features or does have features and settings in it that don't apply to your state. So we'll go over a few of those, but you need to understand that you need to understand the labor laws in your state. They also vary by employer. So again, ask the right questions when you're setting this up to make sure it's set up to not only the state laws, but the regulations and rules that the employer also has. It's flexible and can meet all of these requirements. We developed it to be across the country type of application that should fit the laws in your area. If they don't, let us know. So let's look at where you would set it up under settings, staff config, payroll options, time card options, and then POS options. There are some settings there. We'll look at that in a minute. You'll also have staff, employees. You're going to show extended settings and make those changes there, settings there. There's also, under the analytics, there are reports for labor schedules, forecast, missing lunch breaks, and store-wide work schedules. So let's take a look at what those look like. Okay, we're now in the back office software. So to turn on the labor scheduling and to set those settings up, you're going to go in store config, and then under staff config, payroll options. So set up the how often the payroll, what the payroll period is, and then the day of week it starts. Some of the key things you're going to need to put in to make sure there's the overtime percentage and the double time percentage. Daily overtime after so many hours. Some states say that if you work anything over an 8-hour day, then that's overtime for that day. Other states don't really look at that. They look at how many hours per week. So these are why you have the different settings here. This is if the payroll is by day, and this is if it's by the week. You also will need to set the holidays. These do not come standard with the software. So you're going to have to go in and add the different holidays that the system needs to compensate for. So Christmas, New Year's, 4th, July, those different things, whatever holidays the restaurant is open and wants to pay their people additional payroll for those days, for holiday pay. Key one here is the time clock rounding. Some states allow for a rounding. So if they clock in 5 minutes early, then it's going to round up to the top of the hour, for instance. That is an example of what I'm talking about. In this case, 0 is the default. If you want a 5-minute grace period, then you can do that. Clock in grace period here says that they can clock in 5 minutes before the shift. That's generally the default that you need to go with. If the restaurateur wants them to be able to clock in earlier, then whatever minutes that is early, you use here. This flag says that if they clock in early, it then jumps them to the top of the hour or their scheduled time. Here's the clock out grace period. Same type of philosophy is if they clock out longer than 15 minutes, it takes a manager to approve that. The default break is 10 minutes. You can make that whatever you wish. And then tip reporting, this is that 8% that is the standard by the IRS guidelines, that they will declare at least a minimum of 8% of their sales as tips. I like these here for the simple fact that you want somebody that's on the clock to be the one running the register or have access to it. So prompt clock in at POS login to make sure that they are clocked in, and then force clock in before POS access. This one makes sure that they do not have access unless they are clocked in. Go through these and see any others that you think would be applicable to your situation and your customer. But that's how you set up the payroll. In the staff area, you're going to have the extended settings are where you get into the payroll options. These are the standard login requirements that you have to have. Extended is when you get into the job title. It is hourly, whatever the pay rate is. This pay rate will override the default pay rate for that job title, because you do have a pay rate by job title, but this rate will override that. Holiday pay, you will drop down and then they get overtime. Here's the POS options for languages and whatever. You don't really need all that. You do want to make sure that if they are a server, that they are shown as receiving tips. So that way that the tip declaration shows up at the end of when they clock out, to the end of shift. Under the scheduling area, which is what I want to show, is that there's some easy, this is really simple and really easy to do. And back to the questions, if they have 10 or more employees, you really need to be showing this, show the simplicity of it so that they understand how to use it, and therefore that helps make the software stickier. Restaurateurs and restaurants who have certain features that they really fall in love with really don't want to get rid of their software. So this will help keep your competitors out of your customers. So I'm going to select the employee here for the cashier, and then you just go through and add a schedule. You'll have 3 schedules per day so that the person can work a schedule for lunch, take an afternoon break, and come back for the dinner rush. So you're going to input the clock in, at what time they're going to clock in. So at 11 a.m., and I want them to clock out at 2. If they have breaks, you would put those in there, but that's really all that you have to do. It's clock in and clock out, unless they have a break, and then you have to choose if the break is compensated. Some states require that the break be compensated, so that's why that. If they come back for a dinner rush, then you would put in simply what time they're coming back. Now that person now has 2 schedules, lunch schedule and a dinner schedule. You simply repeat that for every day that they work. That's all there is to setting up a schedule for that employee. What you're going to find is the employees generally work the same schedule every week. And as you're doing that schedule, it's absolutely adding up the hours that they are working. And that goes at the bottom. So you have regular, overtime, double, and total hours. That's all there is to setting up the schedule for an employee. Just repeat that for whatever days they work. For employees that have been on the clock and been working for a while, you can have multiple shifts saved in their file. So this one is they're just basic default. This is their schedule that they always work, Sundays and Mondays. That can be their schedule every week. It doesn't have to be something that you have to create every week. It just repeats over and over and over again unless you change it. Then if you do, you can have a special schedule just for that 1 week. Once you're ready and you've accepted that, you can put in the date that schedule's for. Then when you're done, if you wish to, you can email that schedule. Once you're done making the schedules for the entire restaurant, then you have a button or a choice to email all the schedules. So every schedule for every employee can be emailed to them. If you were being asked to help an individual who was having financial problems, the first thing you're going to do is ask that person to do a budget. And that budget is spending every dollar that they make before they get it. So it's allocated in the right areas. Well, that's what a scheduling system does, is it schedules and budgets their dollars. So here, once you've done the schedule, you now have the forecast. You have the budget. It's lets them spend their labor dollars before the schedule is even here, before the week is even here. This then allows them to forecast properly based upon their sales expectations, and they know beforehand what labor dollars they are spending. This is critical to the survivability of these restaurants, is that they do a labor schedule for a budgeted amount. Here are the schedules. Shift 1 and Shift 2 for this individual. Everybody should have a schedule. The store-wide schedule here allows you to see everybody's time in and time out for the schedule for that time period, so that they know exactly what they're getting into before the week even gets here. Other reports that deal with this would help out, maybe a labor time card report. This one is exportable, so it can be sent to a payroll company. Every time you see this little green button here, that tells you it is has an export capabilities. We are going to release in the next few weeks a QuickBooks interface for Aldelo Express that comes standard with the software. It will be for labor, payroll, and inventory. So this is coming in the next few weeks. So any customer who's using that type of software would have an export available to them as direct import into QuickBooks. Right now, we can export into, say, Excel, and from there they can go pretty much wherever they would like to import.
For more information about Aldelo and our products, you can always call us at 800-801-6036 or email us at sales@aldelo.com. If you have a support question, email support@aldelo.com, or you can check us out at the family of websites that we have: Aldelo.com, AldeloPay.com, and the Aldelo.Express.